Hello, today is Wednesday, March 6th, and welcome to episode 592 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today by NSI Advisory Board member Les Munson and fellow Algene Salgery. We did have Jamil Jaffer scheduled to talk today. He dropped on us late, so one of us might be a stand-in. So if you hear ranting and raving, that's us pretending to be Jamil. Stay tuned. All right, team. So today we are turning back to the conflict in Iran. I'll put conflict in air quotes. I'm not sure what we're calling it. Officially, we still have the U.S.-Iran ceasefire in place. We've talked about a bit on the show about what that actually means, since there are actually, Iran's attacking commercial ships. It's engaged U.S. forces. There's a lot going on. So the word ceasefire might be a bit questionable. We had an announcement from Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday that Operation Epic Fury is over and that the U.S. has shifted to a defensive posture, focused more on restoring commercial passage through the Strait of Hormuz. To that end, on Monday, the White House announced Project Freedom, which is where the U.S. is going to actively guide and escort commercial ships through the strait. But then on Tuesday, one day later, Project Freedom was canceled because President Trump announced they're trying to finalize a deal with Iran, so they're going to pause Project Freedom. So, guys, just if you keep up, there's a lot of F's going on. Operation Epic Fury's done. Freedom started and is paused. So right now, nothing is happening. To be clear, Defense Secretary Hegseth said that Project Freedom is different from Operation Fury. So he didn't want to run afoul of Congress, and we have a discussion on the War Powers Act. And at the same time, what is this deal they're talking about? Pakistan has announced that the U.S. and Iran are so close to a one-pager. Our favorite thing in D.C., right? All policymakers, we want a one-pager that would end the conflict. The one-pager might just be a framework for future talks, though. So, question: what can be in this magic one-pager we might see announced later? Okay, so some developments, perhaps. Les, I want to turn first to you. What is in this one-pager? I know you don't like to read too much, so what do you want to see?
I love that it's a one-pager. When I was a staff person on the Hill and we were doing work for committee chairs and stuff like that, we limited the policy memos, I think, to a page and a half.
Ooh.
Maybe you could go 1 3/4 if, to prep for a meeting kind of thing.
Double-spaced
you'd give
or
the chair.
single-spaced?
Yeah, well, it's a fair question, but it was keep it tight, folks. It's harder. In the grand scheme of things, it's harder to write short than to write long, right? Brevity is a skill. And so we should appreciate the kind of the haiku nature of this arrangement that may be coming, right? We're talking Wednesday morning. This could either be international law by Wednesday afternoon, or we could be back to fury or freedom in the afternoon, right? There's a bunch of different paths we could go down. I think it's great that it's really short. Iran's going to suspend uranium enrichment, which is great. Both sides will drop their blockade and ships will travel freely through the Strait of Hormuz as God intended. That's fantastic. And then we're going to talk about the nuclear weapons program in the future. This sounds great. I believe there's an interesting detail of Iran getting a lot of its frozen funds. So this does start to sound a little bit like the JCPOA, I have to say, which is the Joint Combined Plan of Action from the Obama administration 11 years ago. It does start to sound a little bit like that. Now, the interesting thing about JCPOA is it was really long. There were like 18 different documents. It was hundreds of pages. I read that thing back when it came out. And we had actually had to force the Obama administration to give it to Congress, by the way, because they really didn't want to. We had to force them to do it. That was probably the best thing we ever did. But it was long. It was complicated. There were a ton of things to keep track of. I love this idea of it being a one-pager. Everyone will be able to see it and read it and look at it, because if the Iranians are looking at it, it can't be classified, right? If Iran can see it, so we're all gonna be able to look at this thing and offer our thoughts. It's going to be terrific.
Well, plus it's a one-pager for now, but it's a framework to accomplish these. So I would imagine it's going to run a little bit longer than one page.
They said one page. I'm like, this can be the touchstone, granted, for further agreements. But if this gets us out of the current kerfuffle, it could be the greatest one-page document in history. No one's seen anything like it.
It's better than Gettysburg Address, even better. Algene,
Well,
we've got.
that might actually be sacrilege. I'm not sure you can say
I was
that.
about to say, Les, I just put some words out there. I don't agree with that for the record, listeners. So please don't hold that against me. Okay, Algene, we've got Operation Epic, we've got Fury, we've got Freedom. Are these different things? There's talk on the Senate about war powers. How is the White House signaling its intentions with Congress? Does it care what Congress might do?
I think that everything that we've seen out of this White House points to the fact that they don't actually care what Congress might do. And actually, Congress has generally been happy to roll over and let them do what they want to do. I think what's one thing that Les said I find really striking and important is that, yes, when Obama came out with the JCPOA, we in Congress, in a bipartisan way, pushed for the administration to share that document with us, share the many documents and pages of reading with us, to review it. And, that was done in a bipartisan way. So what I'm curious to see is how Congress will react or act, or whether they will act going forward. I think it's really interesting that, Congress left Washington last week without forcing a war powers confrontation, even though the 60-day deadline had passed. Senate Majority Leader Thune said that he did not see much appetite amongst Republicans to act because lawmakers were receiving regular military readouts. I don't know. It's quite dizzying given the events. We're Wednesday, and so much has happened in this week already. So, I don't know how abreast Congress is right now. I think Senator Mikulski said that she was working on an AUMF that would function as a restraint, and that she intended to introduce it after the Senate reconvenes if the administration still lacks a credible plan and information after the 60-day mark. And so I think in one way, maybe this new state of play with the one pager is a response to that. We'll see. I mean, Senator Graham has said, by contrast, that he's, urging a harder line before the pause. He had said that, saying that Iran's attacks on UAE and shipping justified a big, strong, and short response against Iran's war machine. And so, it seems like the GSP split is kind of clear. Thune is cautious. Mikulski is looking for congressional guardrails, and Graham is pushing for, escalation. So I haven't seen much response since the pause was announced late last night. But I think the congressional fault line is pretty well set. Democrats are likely to continue to press for war powers. Mikulski's probably, and her allied Republicans, there's about 5 of them, it seems, may demand limits on an AUMF. And hawks like Graham will attack the pause if it looks like Iran gained leverage. So interesting week in Washington with regard to Iran and the response. And I look forward to continuing to watch developments.
Algene, let me agree with you that Congress needs to speak up here. I think Congress should say something else, though. Congress ought to be pressuring the administration to get Iran to limit its support for proxy forces in the region. It ought to be pushing for limits on the Iranian ballistic missile program. And it ought to be looking for some sort of new approach for this remaining government, this current regime, to treat its own people better, right? We just saw just a few months ago the slaughter of perhaps tens of thousands of Iranians who were protesting against their government, an outrageous violation of human rights that should appall everyone. Congress ought to be pushing the administration to be pushing Iran to reform more. Now is the time to do it. If we don't act now, we're gonna kind of lose the moment here. So I think that's I'll offer up here, Jones, that's my Jaffer imitation. I didn't use the word ridiculous, and I didn't actually call for more bombing, but that's about as close to Jaffer as I'm going to get.
I thought we were going to do Ultimate Fury.
There's no fault line there. I completely agree with you. I think if we poll Congress right now without cameras and just did a secret poll, I think everyone will agree with you. It's a bipartisan support for all of those lines of efforts, and I think it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
They should put us in charge, Algene.
you have President Trump saying if that Iran doesn't agree to this one pager, right, he's going to start bombing, which does that resurrect our Operation Epic Fury? And then what happens to our 60-day window that has concluded? To your point, Algene, does Congress act? How do the splits actually manifest if we go back, if we move away from a defensive posture, right?
Can we do a future episode on the War Powers Resolution and what a horrible idea and horrible policy it is, because it makes everyone do these crazy yoga poses that are not realistic at all, and no one believes what anyone is saying. We got to get rid of that thing. Let's repeal it.
Secretary of State Rubio did say yesterday that it is 100% unconstitutional. So,
and he is correct.
You might have a challenge in court there. Okay, well, yes, Les, on a future episode, maybe a fun Friday. Who doesn't want to talk about congressional legislation?
War Powers Resolution Fun Friday.
It's very fun.
Take your notepad out, listeners, and get some notes going. That's a wrap. Thanks so much to Grace Trice, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSI staff and their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, May 8th. I don't know, maybe War Powers Friday. We'll see, for another great episode of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check out our channel there. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.